Her badge stopped working at exactly 6:02 a.m. on a Thursday. Not a minute before, not a minute after. She stood there in front of the data center's main access door, coffee in one hand, ID in the other, the little green LED blinking red like it was laughing. Camille didn't curse, didn't huff. She just stared at it, stone still, as if daring it to blink again. It did, once, twice. Then went dead. She didn't try again, because Camille already knew. See, most people thought of her as the badge lady, like she handed out lanyards, and programmed the door buzzers with a chisel and prayer. 18 years inside this corporate monolith, buried in basements humming with servers and stale coffee. She had keys, real and digital, that no one else even remembered existed. If you peeled back the drywall in the security wing, you'd probably find her name etched behind the pipes. She was the access system, not because it said so on a float chart, but because somewhere between patch updates and failed penetration tests, the system had quietly started depending on her. And no one noticed, until Darren showed up. Darren came in like a podcast ad, glossy, loud, full of startup lingo and smelling like expensive failure. Fresh from Stanford or Wharton or whatever overpriced factory churned out MBA terminators. Called himself an optimizer, whatever the hell that meant. First day on the job, he used the phrase digital synergy in front of Camille. She stared at him so long he actually asked if she was okay. She was fine. He just wasn't worth blinking for. The joke started around week 2. Little barbs tossed around open office pods by 20-something contractors who thought legacy system meant boomer with a pension. Someone left a sticky note on Camille's desk once. Does the ghost in the shell need coffee? Haha. HR called it a morale-building prank. Camille didn't even remove it, just filed it digitally. She filed everything. Then came the closed-door meetings. She knew every inch of that building, and she knew exactly where to stand to hear Darren say things like, "We can cut 2 heads in access control if we port to Flex Shield," and honestly, Camille's got 1 foot in retirement anyway. 1 foot, huh? Why was she still the one logging 3 a.m. badge anomalies that saved them from a 4-act breach last quarter? Still, she said nothing. Just sat quietly in her cage of patch cables and ID laminators, listening to her hours get trimmed and her name vanish from project logs. She was officially non-core. Then her badge died. Not because of an error, not because of some fluke, because Darren ordered it. She found the audit trail 2 days before, hidden under a flurry of approvals from new hires who couldn't code their way out of a JSON loop. A change order tagged as deactivation. Asset Legacy 113, her ID, signed by some third-party schmuck out of Georgia. She hadn't even been fired, just phased out. So when that little light blinked red, she didn't call HR, didn't storm into Darren's glass office demanding explanations. She got in her car, turned the ignition, drove home, waited. Darren called it modernization. Said it with the smugness of a man who's never soldered a board or traced an intermittent fault at 2 a.m. under fluorescent lights that hum like tinnitus. Camille had seen buzzwords come and go, but this time was different. This time, the budget cuts came with press releases, a software suite from some vendor with a cool logo, and a pitch deck full of diagrams that made 0 sense to anyone who'd actually seen a badge reader choke on a corrupted sink. Flex Shield, they called it. All cloud-based, zero trust, AI-monitored, blockchain-hypnotized horseshit. Darren paraded it around like a trophy wife, nodding along while sales reps used phrases like proactive compliance architecture and autonomous threat response. Camille had seen the back end. The system didn't even handle daylight saving time without breaking half the timestamp logic. Still, no one asked her. Her days got quieter, too quiet. Systems she once maintained started slipping away, moved to pilot projects and transitional environments. Her ticket load didn't shrink, it vanished. 1 week she had 38 open issues. Next week, 3, all assigned to new techs, contractors, outsourced kids from companies Darren claimed were nimble and cost-aligned. Camille called them what they were, disposable. Then they came for Jerry. Jerry was the kind of guy who called every laptop a unit and still labeled his flash drives with masking tape. He'd been with Camille since before the last reorg, back when the badge system still ran on a Frankenstein SQL box. She kept alive with spit and daily prayers. Darren let him go with a cheery email thanking him for his years of dedication and a reminder to turn in his badge. A week later, Alina was gone too, said she was restructured. That was the word of the month, restructured, like she was drywall. Camille didn't cry, didn't fight. She just came in every day and documented, quietly, thoroughly, like she always did. And then, one morning, she went to scan into Sector 2, her sector, and the door didn't open. Beep. Red light, tried again. Beep. Red. She stood still just like before, blinking once, twice, slow as a snake about to strike. Try again, the guard offered, a kid who probably thought Scuzzy was an anime character. She didn't. She turned and walked to HR. The office smelled like peppermint lotion and fake plants. Dana, the HR lead, looked up like Camille was interrupting a tick-tock break. My badge failed, Camille said. Dana blinked like she was trying to remember who Camille was. Oh, you'll have to talk to Darren, of course. No apology, no explanation. No mention of the fact that Camille still had an active contract, no termination notice, no offboarding steps. Just talk to Darren. Camille didn't talk to Darren. She walked out. Slowly. No dramatic pauses, no door slamming, no you'll regret this. She didn't leave a resignation note. Take her framed photo of the old crew from the 2009 upgrade project. Didn't even log out of her terminal. She just left. And when she got home, she didn't pour wine or rage on Facebook. She pulled out her old ThinkPad, opened a shell, and started watching. Because if Darren thought disabling her badge meant she was gone, he was about to learn the difference between access and control. First badge failure hit Tuesday morning at 9:17 a.m. Clean cut. Sector 4 refused entry to 3 contractors trying to access a cooling cluster. The badge reader blinked red, then blinked nothing. They thought it was a power blip. A reset fixed it for exactly 6 minutes. Then Sector 7 died. Then the freight access door wouldn't open for the hardware delivery team, who waited in the parking lot for 2 hours before someone noticed they were still there. Darren chalked it up to integration friction. Blamed the new cloud sync protocols. His voice got tighter in meetings, though he still clung to that MBA cadence, tossing around words like latency, differential, and infrastructure maturity. By Thursday, 5 badge readers were down. The Flex Shield dashboard kept pinging with false positives and unknown device IDs. The new hires didn't know what they were looking at, so they rebooted, again and again. One of them reset a whole segment of access nodes without checking failover dependencies. Took out authentication for half the biometric scanners on the east wing. A vendor got stuck in the sub-basement stairwell for 26 minutes. The emergency latch had rusted shut. No one had tested it since Camille left. And through it all, Darren kept smiling. It's just a transition period, he told the board liaison. Camille's system had undocumented quirks. We're aligning it to spec. Quirks. That's what he called the handwritten bash scripts she built over years to keep ghost devices from pinging access logs into a tailspin. That's what he called the layered protocol she designed to catch spoofed badge attempts from external networks. He didn't understand the system, but it understood him. Every automated audit, every timeout ping, every delayed sync Camille had quietly tagged in log files across a decade of patchwork IT evolution. They were still there, still running, just unmonitored now. And slowly, they began to decay. One junior sysadmin, Aaron, a nervous wreck with energy drink stains on his hoodie, finally messaged her on LinkedIn. Hey Camille, sorry to bug you, but did you ever patch that Tier 3 script loop that used to trigger when badge node B2.44 goes async? I think it's back. The logs are going crazy. No reply. Camille read it. Of course she did. She even hovered her cursor over the reply box. But she didn't type. Instead, she opened her local terminal. Watched as 5 systems simultaneously tripped the flag for unknown dependency timeout. She sipped her coffee and clicked refresh. 3 more. She leaned back, cracked her neck. The system wasn't crashing. It was unraveling, and she hadn't touched a single thing. It happened at 4:07 a.m. Just like a stroke, sudden, irreversible, and eerily quiet at first. The security feed, normally a chessboard of blinking green, froze mid-cycle. Then turned a full grid of red, every single badge reader. Offline. From the executive floor to the loading dock. From the biometric checkpoint near the thermal cluster to the ancient freight elevator that still groaned like it hated its own purpose, dead. First guy to find out was the janitor. Couldn't get into the lobby closet to refill paper towels. He called building services, who thought he but-dialed them. By the time the first shift arrived, the parking lot looked like a Best Buy on Black Friday, engineers, contractors, and admin staff crowding around doors that wouldn't open. Panic didn't start with a scream. It started with a Slack ping, anyone else locked out, followed by another. Guys, my badge isn't working, and I've got to reboot node group Delta before the update script pushes. Then, none of the backups are triggering. At 4:13 a.m., the access control server began logging 10,000 plus access denial pings per minute. The log file ballooned to 4 GB in 12 minutes. The system couldn't rotate the logs fast enough. They started overriding themselves. And then the scripts began to loop. Autonomous badge sync scripts Camille had written years ago, never properly integrated into Flex Shield, began calling deprecated authentication paths. Those paths no longer existed. Each call failed, then retried again. No failout, just infinite recursion. The CPU on the badge server spiked to 99% and stayed there. At 4:19 a.m., internal diagnostics for the physical security layer flagged incomplete dependency tree. That was Camille's design, a protection mechanism, a digital deadman switch. Nobody else knew it existed. The backup authentication systems, biometric, CodePad, and NFC relay, were tied to a cascading initialization chain that relied on Camille's private credential hash to finalize boot, which no one had, because Darren had deleted her user profile. Brilliant move. Emergency access codes? Worthless. They depended on the same verification loop. The IT contractors began texting Darren directly. He didn't answer at first. Then he tried rebooting the badge servers remotely from his tablet. Nothing responded. The subnet was loopstorming, requests pinging in infinite failure and choking the switches. The building itself was sealed. Even the fire doors couldn't be triggered manually without violating OSHA regulations that the company had spent 6 months navigating for their last compliance check. Inside the building, the few employees who had slept over for the late shift were trapped. They huddled in the vending machine lounge, trying not to panic. A junior tech tried calling the vendor who sold them Flex Shield. They were asleep in Dubai. And Camille, she was on her porch, wrapped in a fleece blanket, watching the sunrise like it was a movie premiere. Her ThinkPad sat open beside her, battery full, CPU idle, logs scrolling silently like prayer beads. Not a finger lifted, not a command sent. She just let go. The system had always depended on her. Now it was proving it. At 6:12 a.m., the first server rack breached thermal tolerance. Not because of a power surge, not even from overuse. As the airflow automation that regulated cooling protocols was tied to internal zoning, zones that now read as inaccessible due to badge system failure. And when the cooling daemon couldn't verify physical access compliance for the emergency vent override, it defaulted to safe mode, which meant it did nothing. Server room 3 reached 103 degrees F in 8 minutes. By 6:30, the temperature in rack cluster Delta crossed 109 degrees F. Blade servers began shutting down to protect themselves. Remote management tools timed out. Monitoring dashboards grayed out. The Flex Shield AI flagged it as a suspicious hardware event. Darren was asleep on his ergonomic nightmare of a mattress when his phone began vibrating like a possessed jackhammer. By the time he answered, the COO was already 3 layers deep into a profanity spiral and demanding a full incident report. Words client breach and legal exposure started surfacing like sharks around blood. By 7:02 a.m., 2 enterprise clients filed SLA violations. One had just lost access to their medical records cache. Another's cloud instance failed to sync overnight backups for 4,000 users. The financial penalties alone would be 6 figures per hour. Still, no one could get inside the building. Someone suggested breaking a window. Legal shut that down. There were liability issues, not to mention the fact that some of the windows were triple-tempered security glass, rated to withstand small arms fire. The VP of infrastructure called in a physical locksmith, who laughed until he realized they weren't joking. Then he quoted $7,000 and a 4-hour arrival window. Darren agreed. It didn't matter. He needed something, anything, that looked like progress. At 7:24 a.m., system administrator in Iowa realized something was deeply wrong when even the offsite backup relay failed to initiate. The Datacenter's heartbeat, its pulse check script, wasn't running because it required a physical key confirmation Camille built in after a near-loss event 5 years ago. Her idea, never documented, too obscure, Darren had said. By 8:11 a.m., Darren was on an emergency board call trying to explain why an entire Tier 3 data center, supposedly rated for 99.9999% uptime, was flatlined on a Monday morning with no cyber attack, no natural disaster, and no employee sabotage. Except sabotage didn't have to look like a crowbar. Sometimes it looked like absence. Sometimes it looked like a woman you forgot to invite to the vendor onboarding meeting because she wasn't strategic. Camille sat in her kitchen, one leg tucked under the other, sipping gas station tea and watching the news. Her cat slept beside her, dead to the world, just like the badge server in Rack E14, local station. B-roll of concerned employees outside a glass monolith. No one talking to reporters. No names. Just a two-line caption. Major tech firm suffers unexplained data center failure. Cause under investigation. Camille smiled, not because she was vindicated, because for once they didn't know who to blame. And that, her, was justice in its purest form. By 9:00 a.m., Darren's forehead glistened like a pork chop in a sauna. His tie was gone. His voice, normally TED talk smooth, now cracked like old vinyl. He had tried everything. The Flex Shield vendor looped him through 3 departments before casually informing him that physical access failures fell outside their cloud SLA. Local hardware's your responsibility, they chirped from a call center in Estonia. He slammed the phone down so hard the case cracked. By 10:15, he'd flown in a forensic IT firm with a name that sounded like a Bond villain's hedge fund. They charged $1,800 an hour and wore blazers like body armor. After scanning the network for an hour, their lead consultant, some guy named Troy with a Bluetooth earpiece and an allergy to humility, said, "Looks like someone designed the dependencies to eat themselves." Darren blinked. "Does that mean? It means your system's cannibalizing itself and we don't have root access to stop it." "Who built this?" Darren swallowed, hard. At 11:03, he called Camille's old desk phone. The line rang 7 times. Then a voicemail, "You've reached Camille. If this is a badge-related emergency, it's probably already too late." He stared at the receiver like it had insulted his mother. By noon, he was pacing the stairwell, tie gone, hair wild, whisper yelling into his phone between emails and Slack pings. HR wouldn't take responsibility. Legal was now involved. Facilities had threatened to walk. The CIO sent him a single-line message. "You told me Flex Shield had us covered." Finally, at 12:41 p.m., Darren opened his Gmail tab and typed, "Subject, urgent, need assistance to Camille H. at Proton Mailcom Body. Camille, I believe we are facing significant access control failures. I would like to request your assistance in resolving this matter. Please respond at your earliest convenience." He waited 1 hour. 2, nothing. Then, at 4:22 p.m., a single reply arrived. "My consulting rate is $400/hour. Prepaid, no refunds. Camille, no explanation, no warm greeting, just a rate," like she was quoting him for snake removal. Darren didn't hesitate. "Wired $4,000 immediately." She responded 5 minutes later with a private session link. When the call connected, Camille appeared on screen with a coffee mug that said "World's okayest employee." She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She just said, "Open the override port on node B2.44. The fallback script's waiting for permission." Darren scrambled to obey. 10 minutes later, one zone lit back up. Just one. Sector 2, the core diagnostics rack. He exhaled like a drowning man catching a straw. "Thank God," he muttered. "Can you do the rest now?" Camille stared at him flatly. "That wasn't the deal, but we still can't get into critical storage." "Backup power's running out per page," she repeated, "and I only billed you for 1 hour." She disconnected. He tried calling back. Nothing. Tried emailing again. She replied 3 hours later, "Further assistance requires a new contract. Terms available upon request." Darren sat back in his chair, sweating bullets while the building he swore he had optimized continued to choke on its own unacknowledged architecture. The building didn't need a hero. It needed its ghost back, and Camille wasn't haunting for free. At 7:12 a.m. the next day, Darren's inbox lit up like a fuse. Subject line: "Restoration proposal terms attached." The email body was just one line. "If you want the building breathing again, read the PDF." He opened it, half expecting a ransom note written in crayon. Instead, he found a clean, surgically worded contract. 3 pages, legally ironclad. The title: Executive Consulting Agreement Camille H. It opened with a blunt clause. Camille would be reinstated as Chief Access Security Architect, role that did not previously exist, but which would now report directly to the board, bypassing Darren entirely. She would be granted full infrastructure veto power over all third-party vendors touching the access, authentication, or facility management stack. All of them, including Flex Shield. Oh, and retroactive hazard pay. Darren's pulse hit triple digits. He called legal. Legal said, "You don't have a leg to stand on, and also you're an idiot." Called the board. They were already on a video call, 10 gray-haired executives in 10 different angry time zones. The chairman's voice was gravel-soaked in jet fuel. "Can she fix it?" "Yes," Darren croaked. "Then shut up and sign." The digital signatures processed before Camille even finished her breakfast. By 11:45 a.m., she stood in front of the data center's main entrance again, same coffee in one hand, same deactivated badge in the other. Except this time, the door opened. 2 interns held it for her like she was royalty. She didn't rush, didn't even blink at the badge readers, still blinking red across most zones like embarrassed children caught in a lie. Camille walked through the building like it was her church. Straight to the old access terminal, one they'd tried to decommission 3 times, but never successfully replaced. It booted up in 30 seconds. She plugged in her ThinkPad, opened 6 separate console windows, and began typing like she was pulling bones from a grave. In the first hour, she re-enabled the fallback loop authentication daemon. In the second, she untangled Darren's vendor spaghetti, deleting a Flex Shield module labeled Sync Godino that had been sending recursive pings to an empty IP address in Luxembourg. Cooling came back online. Badge readers chirped awake. Biometric fallback confirmed authorization. 1:46 p.m. Access logs stabilized. Server temperatures dropped. Staff filed back into the building like survivors after a siege. Camille didn't say a word. She just printed out a single sheet of paper, walked it down the hall, slid it across Darren's desk. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Shirt wrinkled, eyes twitching, tie forgotten on a chair. She didn't wait for him to read it. She just said, "This is your training manual now." Glanced at the bold title printed in 16-point font. Redundancy doesn't equal resilience. Camille turned and walked out, slow and steady, every click of her boots a lesson he'd never forget. Behind her, the building exhaled for the first time in 3 days. Alive, but different, because now it belonged to her. Camille's resignation wasn't an event. No announcement. No farewell cupcakes or awkward cards signed by coworkers who never learned her last name. It arrived like everything else she did, precisely, without flourish and fatal to the complacent. Her exit email came in at 7:00 a.m. sharp, timestamped to the second, subject line, "Final credential termination C." Harper, no body text, just an attachment. The PDF inside was 147 pages. Title page, "How to Lose Your Infrastructure in 7 Days. A Postmortem Autopsy of Ignorance and Arrogance by Camille Harper." See essay? The report did not pull punches. It outlined in brutal, dry prose how every system in that building had relied not on modern protocols, but on trust, human context, and cross-wired legacy adaptations that had been silently maintained by her. He cited time-stamped evidence of Darren's decisions. The deletion of her credential, without backup, the blind deployment of Flex Shield, without proper sandboxing, the removal of Tier 2 fallback demons, without validation, the refusal to onboard her into strategic planning, despite 18 years of root-level access. She even included a screenshot of a Slack message, where Darren joked that Camille probably still thinks punch cards are a thing. That slide made it into the viral version. Because yes, Camille uploaded a redacted copy. She scrubbed company names, replaced logos with black bars, but the core was untouched. She posted it anonymously on a niche sysadmin forum under the username BadgeGhost47. It caught fire. Within 24 hours, the post was shared on r/sysadmin, Hacker News, LinkedIn, and 3 private Discord servers. Reddit called it the finest revenge by omission since the printer spooler incident of 2016. LinkedIn users with job titles like infrastructure visionary tried to decode the identity of the company in question. Some guessed right. A few didn't care, because the post was bigger than a company. It was a warning. By day 3, the firm's own clients were quoting Camille's report back to them. By day 5, Darren was removed from the Access Oversight Committee. Title changed. Office relocated. No announcement. Just gone. And Camille, she didn't even flinch. She was already consulting. Full-time, international, her first client, a multinational that reached out after reading her report and asked a single question. Can you teach us how not to screw this up from the start? She didn't say yes. She sent her rate sheet. They paid in full. At home, her office looked different now. Brighter, airier. But one thing sat centered on the shelf. Behind glass, her old badge. The one that blinked red. Framed above a brass plate engraved with, "You should have asked what I do before deciding I didn't matter." The blinking light had long gone dead. But Camille, she was just getting started. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.